malfunction.
10 years ago, when I was first looking into firearms and I was trying to choose a handgun for concealed carry, there were not a lot of good options chambered in 9mm. If I wanted to carry a compact or subcompact handgun, especially a single stack, there were really only a few options on the market. You had the Kel-Tec PF9, you had a couple options from Sig, including a little micro 1911 gun, and a lot of people were choosing the Glock 26, which you don't really see anymore, but they were choosing the Glock 26 because it was really small and stubby, chambered in 9mm, and it was a double stack, so you had a little bit of extra ammo. Fast forward 10 years, and we have all kinds of options on the market, a plethora of different kinds of 9mm handguns, and not just single stacks, but also hybrid stack pistols. And when I say hybrid stack pistols, what I'm talking about are handguns that aren't just focused on being a single stack, but you can actually cram a little bit more rounds into the magazine without it getting so large, like a traditional double stack magazine, that it forces the grip to be really fat. And so you guys are obviously familiar with a lot of these handguns, but one of the problems, it's a blessing that there's so many options out there, but one of the problems is with all these options, which one to buy? There's so many out there. So what we've done is we've taken the 6 most popular micro-sized handguns, 9mm handguns, and we're going to be testing them for the next few days, evaluating them, I should say, shooting 2,000 rounds through each of them. And it's not just going to be me shooting these handguns. I also have Brantley Miriam, who's just recently come onto the team. He's a Carry Optics Grandmaster. We've got Brandon, who you guys are very familiar with, and the 3 of us are going to be shooting all 6 of these pistols to 2,000 rounds, so 12,000 rounds total for this video. And then at the end of the testing, or the evaluation, I should say, we're going to be scoring each handgun on 5 different categories. Trigger, with a score of 1 through 5, felt recoil, reloadability, ease of draw, and my favorite of all, fastability, which is essentially how fast we can shoot the handgun with good accuracy. And we're going to be rating each of these handguns on those at the end, without also knowing what what we're going to be scoring these. And hopefully that will give you guys an idea of what these different pistols are doing and also how they're performing against each other. Starting off, the first handgun is a Springfield Hellcat. You guys are probably very familiar with this handgun. I haven't spent a lot of time shooting these, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So we have this one from Springfield, the P365X. Now there's like 50,000 versions of this handgun, so we had to pick one, and this is the one that we chose. So we have, a grip that is similar to all of these pistols right here, optic compatible, but like I said, there's like 50,000 versions of these. The new PSA Micro Dagger, I'm actually really looking forward to shooting this and seeing how it does. It's very similar to a Glock 43X. The M&P Shield Plus. This will be an interesting handgun to shoot. This was actually one of the few options back then, like 8 years ago or so, that showed up. Chambered in 9mm as a single stack that I recommended to folks, and this is the new version that can take red dots, and you can mount weapon lights, so it's going to be a lot of fun to try this out against all of these. The new FN Reflex, I actually didn't know about this pistol until very recently, so it's going to be an enjoyable time shooting this. And then, of course, last but not least, the Glock 43X. There's a few variants of this handgun, but this is the one that we selected, and it's the one that I would definitely recommend already. This is actually a gun that I built for my wife, so we're going to be shooting this against everything. And you're going to see a couple consistencies here. Every gun has a red dot, and that's because we believe that red dots are the future. And I'm hoping that in the next few years we're going to see red dots on every handgun by default. There's such a great advantage for people over shooting iron sights. So it was important to us to properly evaluate these handguns to have red dots, with the main reason being it is much easier to discern what's going on with the handgun as far as recoil, seeing the dot, fly up and down or off to the sides or whatever. Shooting a red dot than shooting iron sights. We will be able to evaluate these pistols better for you guys in shooting a red dot. And if you choose to shoot irons, that's fine. A lot of the same things, are going to apply. But we're just choosing to shoot dots on all of these guns because we are going to get better data from that. But you'll also see that we have different red dots on all of these. And we're not necessarily trying to evaluate red dots with this. We're just focusing on the handguns themselves. But I did want to mount different red dots to these pistols that are similar to the red dots that we see that most people are putting on these types of handguns. So on the Sig, we have a Sig dot. On the Micro Dagger, we have a Hollow Sun. On the Shield, we have an RMSC. And then on the FN, we have a Hollow Sun. On the Glock, we have an RMR Carry C, or whatever it's called. And then on the Hellcat, we have a Crimson Trace. If some of these dots fail, we'll definitely show you guys what's going on with the dots, but we're trying to focus on each of these pistols. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The holsters that we're using We're using the new Raptor for all of these, primarily drawing from the appendix carry position. We do have for the Hellcat sidecars converted into, you know, without the attachment, because that's what we want to do. And for the FN Reflex, this is going to be super fun. We have a holster from another manufacturer, because we don't actually make holsters for this pistol quite yet. This is a Works holster, and it's going to be super fun because I haven't shot with a holster from another company from the concealment position in a very long time. So I'm actually looking forward to that, utilizing that pistol. You will also see that every single handgun here has a weapon light mounted. Now, we're not going to only shoot with weapon lights on the handguns because we also want to evaluate these without. So we have holsters that are non-light compatible, but all of these pistols can accommodate a weapon light. And that is, again, something that it has happened much more recently with handgun manufacturing. 10 years ago, or even more, there were a lot of handguns that just didn't have Picatinny rails. They didn't have ways of mounting weapon lights. But the fact that you can mount a weapon light on all these pistols just makes all of these a much more viable carry option. And so we're definitely going to be using these with the lights, taking them off as well, and shooting them at night and seeing how they do. But with all that said, we have a lot of ammo we need to shoot today and tomorrow and the next day. So let's get after it. All right, so it's 2 o'clock. We have now shot these guns for about 3 hours. The boxes of ammo are starting to slowly deplete for all the different guns. We currently have a 3 crucifier for shooting with each gun, so 25-meter distance, an accelerator, so close to far, and then burner stuff inside the boxes. So I'm on gun number 5. I have one more, and then we'll be done with this evaluation portion. And then we're just gonna dump rounds into the berm. Just kidding, we're not gonna do that. But this is slow because we are tracking hits and watching what's happening.
This is definitely my favorite gun. This is definitely my favorite gun to shoot, probably. So confirming 0 here on the second day. 2 guns that did the worst and the best overall in zeroing, so that's including groups and just difficulty of zeroing and maintaining 0. This guy was basically completely off paper. This has an adapting mounting plate, so this shifting is not really an issue. This gun just seems to be very, very inaccurate. So my groups are like yay big. With the Hellcat, the 0 moved slightly. All of these guns, 0s moved a little bit, but this was definitely the closest, and these groups are like stacking rounds, and I'm shooting same position, same ammo between all these guns, so you can take out the shooter error with the wide groups on this because I'm doing very, very well with this. And this is also a Crimson Trace optic, so probably one of our least favorites out here, and shooting-wise, the EPS has been our favorite optic, so it's something to consider.
All right, so Brandon just finished up re-zeroing or confirming 0 on all the handguns. We have fresh ammunition out here. The goal is 1,000 rounds on every gun. So 6,000 rounds, each of us are gonna shoot 2,000. My hands are already in a lot of pain, but I've proactively taken Tylenol, and I will continue to be doing so. The first thing we're gonna do now that the guns are, we've confirmed 0, and they're as zeroed as they're gonna be for today, because I'm assuming some of these are gonna come unzeroed at the 600 round mark, is we're gonna start with our field stage. So like yesterday, we shot one USPSA style stage, course of fire, speed and accuracy combined, seeing what these guns can do. We're gonna start with this right off the rip. And for me, this will be a cold start. I'm gonna start with the Hellcat, so that'll be fun. First target's here at about 25. We're actually gonna push it a little bit further back, so it'll be at 30 meters. That's pretty spicy with one of these tiny little guns, or really any handgun for that matter. Immediately move into the shooting area. We have a disappearing target here, so if I move too fast, I'm not gonna see him. So I'm gonna have to plant partial at 10, head box only at about 5, and then another disappearing target here on this side. Move, partial, there'll be an open target a little bit further. There's a reload happening back there somewhere. Enter the last shooting area, target at 20, and then a partial at 10. So the main thing we're testing with this course of fire is pushing basically distance, how far we can take these handguns. Yesterday's stage was all up close, sort of hoser action. And today it's just, hey, let's see what these guns can do at distance. And we're doing pocket reloads. So we're obviously testing the reloadability of each of these handguns. Let's do it. So in a prolonged course of fire like that, that's highly exaggerated. My dot on this Sig flickered like 7 times. Like 7 of the shots I fired didn't even have a sight picture. I didn't even have a sight picture. 7 of the shots in that drill. 7 or 8. The dot was just disappearing. Like it's not there right now. Look. Not there. That's why I just shot 3 mags worth in one drill to see what would happen. So at 1,600 rounds, this little guy not doing so hot.
Feeding issue there.
All right, so we're back on the range for day 3, and we've got 100 rounds that we need to fire right now while it is daylight that we weren't able to fire on day 2 because it just took too long and our hands were pretty beat up. But it's a few days, you know, our hands are good to go. So that's really good because after we're done shooting this 100 rounds in the daylight, we are going to hang out here until it gets a little darker, and we are going to be shooting all these guns with their white lights. So we've got the TLR7 sub on most of the guns, then we have the TLR6 on the shield, and then the last thing that we're going to do for fun is we are going to be shooting some more defensive sort of ammunition. This is Winchester 147 grain hollow point ammunition. The other thing that we're watching for is if any of the guns have stoppages with this particular ammunition. We've had light strikes on the White Box 115. This is an older batch of Winchester, and they did tell us a few months ago, hey, that older stuff from, I want to say this was back in 2020, had some issues, so they sent us some new ammo recently that has been working much better. But if we see any of these guns start to have issues with this good ammunition, in the 100 rounds we're shooting on each gun, that will definitely be something that we will be noting. So let's get after it, shoot through 100 rounds on each of these, and then once it's dark, we will resume.
Dagger.
Dagger!
Bro, that's a good one.
All right, so we're down to our last 200 rounds that we need to shoot out of these guns. So everything's at 1800. That's super fun. So we've got 100 rounds of the standard 115 grain we're going to shoot, just kind of blaze through and do some tests. And then we're going to go to our 147 grain hollow point and see how that fares. We have 2 different pistol lights on these guns because we are shooting these with the lights that we would recommend that people be purchasing with these guns. So the main light that we have is the Streamlight TLR7 Sub. Now this is a newer light that came out that's actually quite awesome. The pressure switches are very intuitive and easy to activate. This light is 500 lumens and it's 5000 candela, so it's sort of kind of focused. But I have a target here in the shadow of our lights right here, and the TLR7 Sub is able to illuminate that and the target a little bit further away at about 15-16 meters. Just fine. So as far as shooting the stage we have set up, this little light is going to be good to go, or should be good to go. On the M&P Shield, because it does not have a Picatinny rail on the front, the Shield Plus, there's a light made specifically for this pistol, and they also make it for a few others. This is the Streamlight TLR6HL. So this is the high lumen version. It's 300 lumens, boasting 4,250 candela, and I can't really see it on the target. And this is a newer light, so it's possible it has an issue because this seems horribly dim, much dimmer than it should be. And we have cleaned off the lens, so that's not the issue. And so that's going to be very unfortunate. It's possible we're going to have to shoot with a handheld light with this pistol light. This also has a laser built in, but we're not going to worry about that tonight. So let's get to shooting, seeing how these guns do. We are using a light-compatible Raptor. That's what we've been using for the last couple days, and what we're going to continue using so that we can still get that excellent draw and accommodate our pistol light.
Malfunction! Malfunction!
No way, dude! I don't know how to reload with a light in my hand. All right, so we're back in the armory. We've got all the handguns here. I'm joined here by Brantley and Brandon, and we have all of our scores and all the information that you guys have been watching through this video for. But before we actually dive into scoring each of the handguns, I want to talk about something that was very important for this video, and that was the holsters that we were using. We were all using the new Raptor Holster. So the Raptor Holster was a holster that our company used to make years ago. It was very simplistic, had a big plastic quick clip on the front, and we discontinued it a couple years ago when we updated the sidecar, and the dev team has been secretly working to update it and add all sorts of crazy improvements, such as molding specific angles into the actual holster itself to help drive the gun into the body for superior concealment. And the holster can accommodate this large metal clip on the front if you do want something that's really easy to throw on. But we were using it with the 2 clips that are included on the holster for all these different guns, with the exception being the FN Reflex, because we don't make holsters for that right now, and the Springfield Hellcat, where we just used one of our sidecars. So you can kind of see a little comparison there. We are a holster company. We are not a YouTube company. None of our videos are monetized. The way that we are able to do projects such as this is through being funded by you all purchasing our equipment. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it and you want to get kitted in the process, head over to T.REX-arms.com and see if there's any equipment from our company that may serve you. So with all that said now, so that's the holsters. The number one question that I saw on social media as we were conducting this evaluation, it's an evaluation, it is not a test, is where is the Sig X Macro? Where is the Glock 26? Where are other guns that were mentioned. Now, this handgun was by far mentioned the most. The reason this is not in this test is this is in a completely different class of firearm, in my opinion, and in our opinion. These are all much smaller handguns, typically speaking. The Glock 43X and the Dagger are getting pretty close to this, but this handgun is sort of in a weird size range. It's similar to a Glock 19, but it's a little bit skinnier. Holds a bunch of rounds, and some of them have compensators built into them. So it is just a different kind of handgun than, say, the M&P Shield Plus as far as what it can do. And we're going to do a separate video on these handguns because there's a Hellcat that's larger. I think it's called like the Hellcat Pro. There's this one, which is larger. It's a 365, but it's the big version. And there's some other guns out there. I mean, there's the Glock 48, which I saw some people ask about. And so they will get their own video. There's also a major cost difference with this particular handgun, this one being around $700 to $1,000, $700 being if you get a really cheap one. So the X Macro is definitely a much more expensive handgun than all the ones represented right here. So these will get a different video, so hold the comments. We will get to these at some point. Now, I have a pretty big disclaimer before we move into the actual evaluation scoring for all these guns. We are all Glock shooters. Now, this is actually probably a good thing because our scores will be consistently weighed against a singular platform, and that is the Glock 17, which is the size of handgun that we are all shooting every week. For those of you who are not big Glock fanboys and don't like Glock, you're probably going to dispute our evaluation and our scores when we're scoring a gun like, say, the 365 or the Hellcat, or as we're comparing the Glock 43, which is a Glock, and we know how to shoot Glocks, compared to something like the Shield. And to some extent, you having that concern is accurate. But you could have the same concern for someone who only shoots Springfield guns going and trying to evaluate all these handguns. Probably the benefit to us being Glock shooters is Glocks are the most popular and common handgun in the United States of America. So we are evaluating all of these handguns against the most popular handgun in America. So we're basing our evaluation off of shooting Glock 17s and Glock 19s, Glocks in 9mm. So that is just something to keep in mind. We are using the evaluation scoring point system of a 1 through 5. We had a little bit of conversation. A 5 is going to be like, that's what shooting a Glock 17 is like, and then everything else is going to be below that. So we have reloadability that we're scoring, how the guns can be reloaded, how easily, ease of draw, how easy are they to actually grab from the holster. We were doing appendix for this entire video. Some guns are easier to grab than others. The trigger, obviously the triggers are different on every single handgun here. I don't think any trigger is the same. The Dagger and the Glock definitely were not identical, but we'll get to that later. And the recoil, that is sort of felt recoil, the recoil impulse, how our dot is moving. We'll get into that on each handgun. And then we're actually slightly modifying the last one, which is fastability. That is sort of all of the variables combined, and we're going to be scoring that 1 through 5, but then adding a 2x multiplier because it is sort of everything all combined. I had a lot of people saying it should be a weighted average, and that's kind of sort of what we're doing. So the fastability is sort of our more powerful score that we're adding to all of these, and then you'll have a total score for every single handgun. And what we're seeing is there a pattern between how Brantley, Brandon, and I are evaluating these handguns? Because again, choosing a handgun is very personal. It's going to be based on your experience shooting handgun. It's going to be based on what you like in a weapon. So what I may say is a great handgun, you may go to a gun store and go, no, I like this one instead. And there is a lot of personal preference involved. But we should be able to see some patterns, which I'm most interested in. And I also have not seen Brantley's scores or Brandon's. So we're doing this blind, and we'll have some fun, and we'll see how it goes. We're going to start off with the FN Reflex. Now, this was a handgun that I didn't know existed up until very recently, and it has also become quite popular. Some of you guys actually probably own this already. So I'll just go first with a few of my points. This trigger was actually quite good on the handgun. It broke kind of weird at certain times. One-handed shooting was really good. Of all the triggers out here, it definitely feels like the most... because this is a hammer fire gun technically. It did not feel like any of the other handguns. It was light and sort of spongy. The thing about this handgun that I did not like the most of all the things is the checkering on the front. The checkering on the front after shooting 900 rounds, so this won't apply to most of you who only shoot maybe 200 and in a day or so, is very painful. Jeez, man, little guns just. So that's the FN Reflex. I'm getting some hits though. Trigger's pretty good. Checkering is starting to become very painful, like it's accentuating how much your hands hurt. But trigger break's really nice. Yeah, you can see it right here. It's all the checkering action right there. It was excruciating pain, to be honest. And also the geometry for the magazine down here, I pinched myself multiple times on the reload for this handgun. 2 days in though, we got the extendo mags, and that gave us a full firing grip and made things just a whole lot better when it came to shooting this handgun. Did not fix the reloading, but it did fix the pistol. So pretty nifty little gun. My fastest splits were 1/8 splits were the splits that I had that were quite good. And then the other evaluation that I did on this gun was shooting at 25 meters into a head box, and I was able to get some headshots with that, and I was quite happy with that. So, Brantley, what were your thoughts on the pistol?
Yeah, mine are pretty similar when it comes to all that, basically. I really enjoyed the recoil impulse of this gun. I thought I was able to really kind of control it and have that slide just track straight back. Love the trigger. It has a nice, kind of a lighter trigger. It breaks kind of a spongy, kind of a wall. It's kind of weird. The first time I actually dry fired this gun, it like just went like it. I pulled the trigger straight through, not kind of realizing where the wall was. So this is the FN Reflex. It's a very interesting trigger because there's no discernible wall. It's kind of just a bunch of mush, and it goes off just a hair earlier than you think. So my first kind of practice shot was like a complete like ED early discharge kind of thing, and very surprising, but overall it's pretty good. Definitely believe the mag's the same. These little short ones are just crap. Not so much. Didn't really have any trouble with the checkering unless you shoot a freaking 900, 800 rounds in a day. Other than that, I actually would prefer more aggressive checkering if I'm going to carry it, just because I want all the real estate. Because this is such a small gun, there's really not a lot of real estate to put hands, so what I have touching, I want to be gripping on the gun really well. Yeah, kind of liked it overall.
So starting off with the same points as the trigger is definitely fantastic. The thing with the trigger is it's light, so I think almost all of us almost had an ND with it through our presentation because of how light the trigger is. Now, the thing to note with this, with the trigger, is when you pull the trigger, it has to go all the way back to reset. So when you're dry firing, you can't just like do a little tap rack for it to reset. Also, the manipulations on this gun are very smooth. So this gun just feels like it's extremely broken in, and that's not actually because of the high round count. I noticed that pretty early on, which is pretty nice. Also, the takedown lever for the slide is kind of a reference point for your thumb, and the more texture you have on these small guns, the better in my opinion, because these are going to be very fatiguing if you're shooting these quite often. So the less effort you have to put in with your hand for recoil, it's going to be just a little more beneficial. Now, the last thing I want to note with this gun, I kind of agree with what everyone said already, but tack magging this gun is very annoying. So the extended mags are a little better, but these small mags, when we first got these, had to be really jammed into the gun, or they just wouldn't seat. So I think Lucas actually pinched his finger on it trying to get it to go home. But if the slides open, put a mag in, it's pretty easy. So overall, I really like this gun too.
So the price point on the gun, these are around $580. So they are one of the more pricey options here on the table. But you know, all things considered, that's not a ton of money, and I'm sure you can get them cheaper. The malfunctions, or stoppages I should say, there were a few different kinds that we had over the 3 days that we shot this handgun. The most interesting was we had, looks like 26 light strikes. Now, we are shooting Winchester white box. However, we are shooting that ammo consistently across all handguns, and not all handguns had the same number of light strikes. So I find it interesting that this hammer gun technically had more light strikes than everything, and possibly that's because the trigger is light. There's just a little bit more less force going into actually hitting the primer than some of these other guns, but we did have a lot of light strikes on this handgun. So from a training perspective, if you're using certain training ammunition, that might be something you have to consider if you are using the FN Reflex compared to some of these other guns out here. We had 2 mags pop when they hit the deck. One on day 1, one on day 2. So again, that's not something that's probably going to happen while you're carrying the gun. That is something that will happen in training, most likely. And that was dropping these onto gravel, which is not as bad as dropping straight onto concrete. So if these are popping on gravel, they'll definitely pop if you're, shooting around, say, concrete or something like that. So that was kind of interesting. We had a couple failure to fires. It could be failure to feeds, I should say. Could be mag related, could be ammunition related, but overall, that was actually pretty good. The main issue was just the light strikes on the handgun for a total of 30 stoppages out of 2,000 rounds fired. Now, let's get to the fun part. Scoring. So what we will do, get out my numbers, is, gotta keep my finger where it is. We're gonna start with reloadability. On a scale of 1 through 5, I rated it a 2.
I rated it a 1.
3.
A 3. All right, 1, 2, and 3. Ease of draw, put it down as a 3.
2.5.
3 as well.
Okay, got some consistency. Trigger, I put as a 3.5.
I did 3.
4.
Whoa! Okay, all right. Recoil, I put down a 3.5.
3.5.
2.
What the heck? All right, this is an evaluation, everyone. It's not a test. And then the last, but definitely not least, fastability, I have a 3, which ends up being a 6.
I gave it a 4, so actually 8.
Same as Lucas, 6.
All right, so not bad. So Brandon, you scored recoil the most differently than us. Why is that?
Yeah, so again, we scored comparatively to Glock 17 guns we shoot, and these guns have smaller grip. So believe it or not, the smaller the grip, the worse recoil is, in my opinion, and this gun has a pretty thin grip, so that's why I scored recoil as low as I did. It wasn't so much the direction of recoil, whether it's flippy or felt when it comes to snappiness. It was kind of, how can I actually grip the gun?
Want to refute that, Brantley?
Even with, that was one of the only guns that I felt like, even though it was a smaller frame than the rest of them, where I still could somehow get good recoil control with it, which was kind of weird because like a shorter gun that we tested out did not have anywhere near close to the recoil ability or the recoil on it, but that one just seemed to just feel smooth, honestly.
So this next one is the M&P Shield Plus. Now this gun is, to me, was a pleasant surprise. Now I have always liked the Shield, the original Shield. I actually ended up buying one for my mom. That's how much I liked it. But this new handgun had some very nice improvements done to it. My favorite thing about this handgun, if I had to pick just one thing, is the trigger. This is an insanely good trigger. If I could put this trigger into my Glocks, I would do so. I really enjoyed that. Probably the worst thing with this handgun that I noticed is because the grip is so small, even being a hybrid stack gun, when you're going to draw it, it's really easy to scoop your undershirt if you're wearing one, or probably your flesh as well. And the ease of draw on this handgun is not as good as some of the other ones. Having a smaller grip is not always a good thing when it comes to actually grabbing and snatching the handgun, and I definitely ran into that on this pistol. Controls were good to go. The weapon light sucks. The weapon light option, this is the Streamlight TLR6HL, so this is the high lumen version. It's 300 lumens, boasting 4,250 candela, and I can't really see it on the target. I would definitely prefer having a TLR7 sub. I will say, though, we did not have a fresh battery in this. We thought we did on the night shoot, so that's our bad, not the fault of this light. And the optic actually did pretty well, I believe, although the refresh rate is pretty bad on this Shield. But the refresh rate didn't really matter once you really start shooting and paying more attention to the target than the dot itself. Magazines, we get 3 different flavors. just like any of the other guns here, there's some pinch factor for sure when you're going to reload. The larger grip, you know, shot the best because you can have a full grip on the handgun. Smaller grip definitely shot the worst. And with this particular trigger and with this particular combination, I found myself actually pulling the gun down more than I should to actually press the trigger. And that was kind of annoying. But with that said, I was able to shoot this at 25 meters on a few of my tests really well, very predictably as far as recoil. So 10 rounds, that was 12. 10 rounds is a 4.4, which is a little bit faster than the Glock, which was like a 4.7, 4.8. Wow. Very consistent. Okay. And I'm trying to hold center. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All on paper. All on paper. Shooting as fast as the dots. Just. So, splits. Let's check it again. 4, 5, 3, 9, 3, 7, 3, 6, 3, 8, 3, 7, 3, 4, 3, 6, 3, 2, 3, 5, 3, 5. So fast. Fast, fast, fast. Guns recovering. Straight up and down. I have one off to the side. Okay, got some damage going on. That really hurts. Don't know what's going on under there. It started hurting. Cool. I'm really happy with that. That's really impressive. I mean, I'd be happy with that with a full-size gun. So the fact that I'm able to do that with a compact, a subcompact type gun, yeah. And you know what's funny? This would not be happening if you was running irons. Absolutely not. A dot takes one of these small handguns and it takes it into the area where duty handguns are, or closer to. The dot is the secret. If you're not running a dot, fix yourself. Even this cheap little guy is running just fine. And this gun's at 1,500 so far. Slide coming back, dot coming down. I was really happy with that. So overall, I enjoyed shooting this pistol quite a bit.
Yeah, to kind of expand upon that, I like the shield actually a lot more than I thought I would. This was actually one of my first carry guns, the original shields in 40, because I didn't know about 9mm. So the Shield Plus in 9 was very nice. The one thing I will say about the recoil impulse is it's very snappy. Like it'll just jump straight off target, but it does return to zero pretty quickly. So that's not as big of a factor to me as returning to zero is better than just having a straight reciprocating slide. Yeah, what Lucas said, the trigger is amazing. I want this trigger in like every gun that I own because it's just a nice, clean, crisp wall. Super nice reset, very good. There's not a lot of texture to it, I will say, on the upper portions where you kind of get to that support hand. So it does kind of slide around a little bit. But when it comes to accuracy and the dot, they were great. The refresh rate does suck, but I only noticed it, I think, maybe one time out of 3 days of shooting. Still wouldn't recommend the optic. It was just something to note.
So the first thing I want to note about small guns is the stiff manipulations on guns. Now the shield out of the box from the get-go felt like it was already broken. It was very smooth. I could drop slide, drop magazines, even with empty mags pretty easily, which is something that I really like. It gives you a perceived high quality of the gun. Now the size of the grip, that's a complaint on a majority of the guns we're shooting, but as long as I can get my pinky on the gun, and that's just the minimal magazine extension, I don't even think it's an addition of the round, just a extended base pad, made this gun very nice to draw. So the other thing with these grips, other than the length, is the width, and having just a little more width gives you a little bit more surface area for your support hand to touch the gun, which the shield did very well on. Now the downside of this gun, and which I actually really hate, is the recoil impulse. It was snappy. Majority of these guns are snappy, but to me this gun flipped quite a bit, and it was kind of a little bit harder to track for me. That's not the case with Brantley or Lucas, but for me, I had a really hard time tracking and getting through recoil on this gun. Despite how good the trigger was, I just couldn't shoot this gun as fast or as well as the other guns.
As far as reliability on the handgun, we had nothing on day one. No light strikes, no issues. But then rolling into day two, we started to get some light strikes. We had 5 light strikes. We had 2 failure to ejects. So started to have a couple little issues. And then on the third day, we had a light strike, a failure to eject, and a ton of double feeds.
Where is the malfunction? Malfunction! Malfunction!
Granted, the majority of those, I think it was 8 out of the 9, were while people were shooting one-handed. I think you had double feeds one-handed, you had double feeds one-handed. I don't recall having any, so that could be a limp wristing issue or something else. Care to share?
Sure, we'll just call it limp wristing. Let's take the variable. Let's put the variable on the shooter.
I don't know. And maybe I didn't shoot it as much as you guys on day 3. I think I did. And I purposefully took it out. I remember when you were getting double feeds, I took it out with a mag and I just ran it one-handed to see if I would get a double feed. I still did.
I will say the double feeds were interesting though. The rounds, it wasn't like 2 rounds going in there. It was the round would extract, and the next round was like pointed downwards in the mag, not even close to going in the chamber. So
I think it has something to do with the flippiness of the gun.
Yeah,
like it just almost flipped up.
Because that gun flipped so much. Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe I'm just finding it different. I don't know. We had one, so the gun started to exhibit some issues as we got into higher round counts because we just had nothing on day 1, and I think that is pretty cool. As far as price point goes, it's about $550, about the same as the FN. It's kind of in there, you know, at the top end for these handguns, but not exorbitantly priced, especially considering that it's a gun with an optic plate that can take, I mean, this light and really nothing else. But let's get to scoring, the fun part for the Shield. Reloadability, I've got 2.5.
3.
4.
Oh, geez. Ease of draw, I've got 2.
3.
4.
What? Trigger, I've got 4.
4.
3.5.
Interesting. Recoil, I got 3.5.
3.
1.5.
Interesting. Fastability, I've got down as a 3, so a 6.
6.
5.
2.5. Yeah. All right, cool.
Your freaking recoil at a 1.
He didn't like it.
It's just because of the snappiness?
He didn't like it.
The flippiness.
Did it flip, but did it come back, or did it come back weird?
It came back, but I could track the other recoil impulses better than I could that gun. So this was, like, these scoring, they were kind of compared to the other guns. They had to be.
Yes, I'll give you
That's
that.
good. That's good.
I'll give you that. It's not as...
So if I put my Glock 17 at a 5, and I put the best of these at a... I don't want to...
You don't want to spoil it yet.
Spoil it, but
yeah.
At a certain number.
Yeah, a certain number.
But from a Glock, this is a 1.5. Okay.
I don't know. I would even consider that just under like a snappy Glock. You get like
this is where preference comes in, because like recoil impulse is definitely going to be on the shooter.
Sounds good. Hope that was helpful. On to the next gun.
The next gun we're going to evaluate is the Glock 43X. This is the short slide, longer-ish frame gun, but my opinions of it was it was a Glock. This was actually kind of the most familiar platform, definitely, because you could actually get a Glock-sized angle to it, get a full grip on it. I very much so enjoyed it, and the trigger was very nice. The trigger was a little heavy, but it was very crisp, and I can accommodate that. I'm like a prep kind of dude, mostly when I'm shooting, so I like the crispness versus a kind of a mush. Good recoil control. One thing this gun did that none of the guns other did was it ate into my hand. It got like a lot of slide bite when the slide reciprocated. Not even just on the normal side, but even on the unnormal side, on both sides. So whenever I got done shooting these guns, my blood was like caked up underneath both of these rails, which was something interesting that none of the rest of the guns did.
I shared blood with Brantley as well. The Glock definitely cuts into my hands, unlike other guns. I also don't mind it. I get cut up shooting a Glock 17 when I'm just super aggressive on the slide shooting. Probably something to do with how hydrated I am, how much web I have in my hands. Who knows? But yeah, this is definitely, of all the guns, I could do things with this gun that I didn't feel like I could do with others. Because it's a Glock, I'm very familiar. The one thing I don't like about this gun, and that's just something I've noticed, is slide release is super stiff compared to some of the other guns here. So that is one thing I noted on this particular pistol. But overall, pretty much everything that Brantley said, liked shooting it. This is actually the gun that I bought my wife, but this is a fun point. I bought her a smaller gun. This will come up later probably, you know, because she runs a lot. She already carries a Glock 19. She shot this and said, I actually want to keep shooting the 19. The 19 shoots better. It's, you know, less snappy than this gun. So this has been a bathroom gun at our house as a backup, and she continued carrying a Glock 19. So that's just something to be said about small pistols compared to larger guns. So this is actually her pistol, and well, not anymore. It's the bathroom's pistol.
They said it well. It's a Glock. So this is definitely the most familiar gun. And I just want to drive home the point of the ease of manipulations. This gun was great all around except for the slide release. I agree with that. So reloads, I would insert the mag and I would drive it. I am pushing as hard as I can right now on an empty mag. It's just a little difficult. Now you throw a Vickers slide release in there, it's going to be great. I have a 43 at home, so it's literally the same slide. The frame is actually the same other than the length and the girth. So same slide release, that's all I'm trying to say, and it's great with the Vickers. So the only complaint I have about this gun is the grip angle. So Brantley and I actually went over this before the video, trying to compare it to a Glock 17. The angle is actually the same, but what I've come to notice after shooting these guns is I'm actually more sensitive to the palm swell angle and where the palm swell is located on the grips in relation to the guns I normally shoot. So this swell is a little bit more, it's actually more aggressive than a 17 and higher up. So it made me feel like I was presenting the gun with the dot up in the air comparatively to the other guns and compared to my Glock 17. For the trigger, it's a Glock trigger. It's very consistent though, so it feels a little heavy compared to most Glocks, but like Brantley said, it's got a pretty firm wall and a crisp break. So overall, I think, like we all said, this is definitely the most familiar and easiest to get behind comparatively to the other ones.
I'm just gonna say y'all have weak thumbs. Never was I reloading that thing off a rack or a empty slide did I have trouble with the slide release. Like on any other gun, it was super, super easy. You can just literally just ride straight on top of it. I'm not sure if my thumbs maybe are longer or maybe stronger.
Or you're just built different.
I might just be
He's
built
just
different.
built different. As far as the stoppages go on the handgun, we had 3 light strikes on day 1. We had a failure to lock back. This is something that I have noticed on Glock 43 magazines, is they don't always lock back. They're not always, in my opinion, seem to be of the highest quality. Then we had 8 light strikes on day 2. We had 1 the next day and a failure to eject. Glock 43X, I had a failure to eject, and the gun loaded the casing back in. I just pulled, so something's up the extractor maybe. So of all of the, if you remove light strikes from the equation, and this would go for most of these handguns, most of these handguns are not having a lot of failures as far as like failures to eject, failure to feeds. We are counting the light strikes because there is a way to compare, which of these guns is having more light strikes than others with training ammo. But the total stoppage count for the 43X is 13, with 1 being an FTE and everything else being ammunition related with the light strikes. So not too bad. And the price point for the gun comes in at $485 to $500, so it is cheaper than the other 2 we've just looked at. So that's pretty solid. You're looking at a $500 handgun. It's pretty common across the board as far as full-size handguns go even, so it's not too bad. Now, we did not test shield mags in this evaluation, which I know I saw a lot of comments and people requesting. There were a few reasons for that. I only had a couple and they were at home and I forgot them. Plus, we're also evaluating the handgun primarily. We're not just evaluating magazines. I think that should be evaluated separately to some extent. So we didn't need the shield mags for anything besides, like, I think 1 course of fire where having 15 rounds in the gun would have been nice. So we were just shooting the handgun with the standard mags, which is what most people are going to own anyway. Now for the scoring, my reloadability is a 4.
Mine is a 4 as well.
3.5.
Ease of draw, I've got a 4.
4.
3.5.
I've got 3.5 for trigger.
3.5 for trigger.
Got a 3.
I've got a 4 for recoil.
I got a 3.5 for recoil.
Got a 3.5 for recoil.
Interesting. My fast ability is going to be 7.
7 as well.
8.
Okay. Very interesting. What's the total then?
I have 21.5.
I have, math is hard.
Input.
12 plus 7.
Science. 19.
Is that only 19?
There's no way that's 19.
8, 12 plus 2.5,
You have
14.5.
12 plus.
Oh, that's,
11.5.
yeah, I'm an idiot. That's 7 and that's
You have
12.
23.5.
I have 22.5. Look at that. Look at that. It's like we're professionals.
For the first 3 freaking guns, we have very similar scores.
I can't wait to get to 365.
Can't wait to get to the Hellcat. All right.
Oh, you're gonna be surprised.
You're...
Want me to go first?
You're ready to start.
Okay. Up next, we have the Hellcat. So my opinion on this is probably going to differ greatly between Lucas and Brantley. That's why I'm going first here. So this gun is actually pretty good all around in my opinion. I think the manipulations are pretty good, pretty smooth. So some complaints I have with this is, one, the trigger. So this does have a pretty distinct wall, but once you hit the wall, you hit a good amount of weight, and then it's pretty mushy from there. So now with this gun, when we did scored drills, this is the gun I shot the best. And I think it has a lot to do with that trigger, because the trigger made me slow down and kind of keep my pace at the recoil of the gun. So that's just a hypothesis though. Is that the right word? Yes. Well, we're gonna use it anyways. Next, next 2 complaints I have is magazines and the grip. So with the pinky extension on it, so again, that's not an addition to the round count, it's just a pinky extension. Gun feels great in the hand, but under recoil, this would like bounce, and I was actually pinching my pinky, which is pretty interesting. Very annoying, more than interesting. Lastly, the last thing I want to note on this is the slide release. So while gripping the gun, my thumb, the slide release is just placed kind of back on the gun, so my thumb would rest on it and I wouldn't get slide lock sometimes. So, but even with the magazine with an actual round extension going back to that pinch point, I still noticed the pinch point. So it's just interesting that I think because of how slow I had to run this gun, I actually shot this gun the best.
I'll go next, I guess. So the Hellcat for me is, I'm just going to say it, worst gun here, to me. And I'm not just saying that because it's a Springfield. I know it's something that some people would love to say because I shot the Echelon recently and actually had a great experience shooting that handgun. This handgun overall, the trigger was not a huge fan of. This gun, compared to all the guns, to me, felt like it recoiled the most. It had a very harsh recoil, and that was even before I got to the point where my hands started to hurt, although then it was much more accentuated shooting this handgun. This gun just moves a lot in the hand. We had some larger magazines, kind of like Brandon was talking about, but similar to the FN, you have that sort of pinch hazard going on if you're slamming a mag into the gun. A little less than the FN, but it can still happen. Even with the larger grip on this handgun, I could still, the recoil was still not what I would want this to be as a small handgun. It was still moving just a bit too much for what I wanted. The controls, though, are fine. Mag release is in a good spot. Slide lock, I didn't have any issues with that. The trigger was heavy, and the recoil was not great. And that is my overall sort of evaluation.
I agree with the recoil, by the way. Recoil was definitely the worst.
It was the worst. All right.
Yeah. So my opinion is probably going to be closer to Lucas's than Brandon's on this one. The weird thing so I had the privilege, the honor, the courtesy of actually zeroing this gun on the first day, and this had by far the best mechanical accuracy of the pistols that we tested. Where me and Brandon both, he zeroed on the second day, we were getting like a fist-sized group at 25 yards. So like these 3 were one group, that 3 was another group. I'll take that all day. However, that was mechanical accuracy. Practical accuracy, when you put it on a timer, you're drawing from a holster, I got nowhere close to those results. This trigger and the recoil impulse and just everything, I could barely hold like AC zone at 20 yards. Now maybe I just suck, I don't know. But I did not enjoy shooting this gun for that reason, as well as the recoil impulse. This gun just hit harder. Almost as if there's like not enough spring built into the gun, or it's just too much weight or something, but it felt like it was like banging into your hands every single shot. And especially after shooting 600, 700, 800 rounds in a day, it just gets very annoying and just like nobody wants to shoot this gun. One thing with the grip size and even like dimension, it's the same kind of dimensions as a couple of other ones, but like the shape was very, very boxy. And I mean, I'm shooting a Glock, I shoot a freaking rectangle. It just felt weird. It was not pleasant to grip onto, a lot harder to grip onto as well, and just did not enjoy shooting this in the least.
All right.
But it is the most reliable pistol.
We'll get to that. Okay,
Spoiler.
shut up. Spoilers so much. All right. So getting to the reliability, this is probably the shocker, is it was the most reliable handgun of everything we have, with a total of 2 light strikes, shooting the same ammunition, and only 1 failure to feed. So whatever magic juju they got going on with this gun, it is highly reliable, it's highly accurate mechanically, but the shootability of the handgun, from what it looks like, is not there like a few other handguns. But let's actually find out with our scores. Also, before we do that, the price on this gun is $580-ish, optic compatible, ready to go. So it's up there with the FN, you know, so $580-ish. So scoring, let's get into the scoring on the Hellcat. This is where it's going to be really fun. I got reloadability at a 2.5.
Shoot, that's pretty generous. I did 1.5.
2.5.
2.5, all right. Ease of draw, I've got a 3.
Got a 2.
2.5.
Trigger, I got 2.5.
I got a 1.
You gave it a 2.
Why am I so high on that? I don't know. Recoil, I've got a 2.
I have a 1 for a recoil. I hated that gun.
I have a 2.
Honestly, I could have gone lower, and I probably should have, but whatever. Fast ability, I've got it at a 4.
Shoot, I got it as a 1.
Well, 1 times 2?
No, 0.5 times 2.
Oh, shoot!
I have a 2.5 times 2 for a 5.
Now, how did you
Wow.
get a 2.5?
Wow, this is...
You just said, oh no, you said the trigger slows it down so you can actually get accuracy.
Yeah, well, I had to weigh in my really high hit factors with this gun for some reason.
You had more malfunctions though. On my score runs, the Hellcat was my lowest scoring gun.
Yeah, I
on
did.
all of it.
Every malfunction seemed to happen with me, so. As with life.
Wild.
My score was 6.5.
14. You're 6.5? 6.5. That's your total score?
I'll give
No,
you.
no.
The
Don't,
trigger-
no. You can't touch anything. You can't touch anything. You're a 6.5.
I'll give the trigger
You're
a
a 14?
I'm a 14. Yeah, because it's somewhat consistent. Okay.
I'm a 14.
I did not like that gun.
I didn't either.
The one thing too, I thought I
not
swore
the- it's
that
not the worst
was gonna
gun
be
on the table.
sleeper. I thought that was either going to
It's
be
the
like
worst gun
the
to me.
best or the worst, and it ended up.
That's
being
your worst gun?
This is my worst gun. 100%. It's the worst gun here.
Okay.
Anyway, to me.
You
My
scored.
evaluation.
This was your worst scoring one.
No.
Yes.
Oh, like on.
I'm
I'm
Hit
not.
factor.
No. I'm not just using the stages. I have
I'm
to look
using
at
both.
I have to look at everything holistically. It's not just that.
Okay.
I couldn't put 2 headshots in a target at 7 meters in under a second from compressed ready, and I can do that with every other gun here.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on. I'll start with the PSA Micro. So, this handgun, I've got to collect my thoughts after that rigorous, delightful conversation. So, the Dagger it was very snappy at 25 meters for me. That was something that I noticed. A little bit different recoil than, say, the Glock, which we have talked about. A little bit more recoil than the Glock, which I thought was interesting. Feel of the grip feels better than a Glock. Yes, I'll give it that. The Dagger texture I actually really like on the full-size Dagger and on the Micro as well. Was not a huge fan of the trigger. Like the Springfield Echelon, this is a trigger that I felt like is fatiguing, or more fatiguing than some of the ones here. I think a lot of that has to do with the reset, where it's not resetting forward as much as some of the other guns out here. So on prolonged courses of fire, I would definitely feel the fatigue of running this gun for 15 plus rounds, unlike some of the other guns here. So I thought that was really interesting. Overall, the controls were solid. It's basically a Glock 43 is essentially what this is. And the gun, shot pretty well. That's about all I'll say. Oh, and one more note. The Glock mags suck out of it and don't drop free. So kind of got to have their special hybrid mag, which is good. I mean, you should probably use this anyway. In their gun, the Glock mags did not work super well.
Yeah. I mean, this is a knockoff Glock. So anything that's good about the Glock is probably going to be good about this. The grip, just feel of it and just placement is a lot better. So actually, if I want to put like the slide of the Glock on this gun, and then I think we would have something to work with. Trigger, I'm not a big fan of hinge triggers. I just don't like it. It just feels like mush, as well as the stacking and stuff once you're actually in the trigger. It's just weird. I did not have the slide bite like the Glock did, but the recoil was, I'm not going to say worse than the Glock. It was just different to me. The Glock and other guns was very, very repeatable. It felt like I was kind of guessing with the recoil with this one. The manipulations were all great, enjoyed it, liked the dot, but Glock mag's not dropping free. But overall, kind of liked it.
So starting with manipulations on the gun, I thought they were all pretty good, except for the slide release again. I think it was actually pretty comparable to the Glock with the stiffness. It did stick out a little bit more to make it a little bit easier, but same thing. If I have an empty mag in the gun, it takes a pretty good amount of force to let that slide go. The trigger, I thought exact same opinion as Lucas. So I think the trigger just seems to have like a longer pull maybe, and makes the reset without the assist, like he said, a little fatiguing. So just over time, it just couldn't shoot the gun as fast over a prolonged course of fire. Now, majority of my opinion on these guns is coming from me doing bill drills at 25 plus, so between 25 and 40 meters. And this was one of my favorite guns. I thought the recoil was actually very similar to the Glock, just snappier. So it went in the same pattern, I just felt more of it. So to me, that recoil impulse was controllable. Now with the grip, comparatively to the Glock, this definitely is better. Again, we're looking at a slightly different angle, the palm sole's in a different angle, so I'm getting a little nitty gritty with these grips. And again, we're comparing it to the guns we normally shoot, but to me this was probably my favorite of all 6 actually. Magazine release was great. It's actually kind of extended compared to a Glock. And yeah, Glock OEM mags do not work. If you have the gun empty, they'll fall out. So that's a Glock mag falling out pretty nice and easy. But the OEM mags definitely worked better. They go in nice and smooth. It's just metal and polymer. Feels great. And also they're 15-round mags, which is pretty cool. So you're basically getting a Shield Arms mag from factory with the same exact size gun as the Glock. Now, also these mags do technically work in the Glock 43. So overall, very much enjoy this gun, other than the malfunctions, which Lucas will talk about.
And boy, will I. So the PSA Dagger, as far as the reliability, which again, the nice thing with the reliability of a handgun when you're tracking reliability is it is not an evaluation. It is very objective. So we had a bunch of light strikes just like on all the other guns. 2 the first day. We actually didn't have any on day 2, which was wild. And then on day 3, we had 3. The thing that we had that was different on this gun compared to the others was a lot more failures to extract and actual stoppage problems.
PSA Micro Dagger, another malfunction, failure to extract. Should be good.
Okay.
I'm trying to unload the Dagger. It is super stiff. So that's interesting. Okay, that one was all right. That one's all right. Every once in a while, it just gets hung up. Big time. Looks like I have a stuck casing, so slide is locked to the rear, and it does not want to come out. So I'll remove the magazine.
Failure to extract.
It smashed this firing pin all. Firing pin smashed this all like... I don't think it was in battery. I think that's what that is.
Dang.
I don't think it's shooting.
It's not going to be in battery in the first round?
I mean,
That's a very odd strike. Let's see if it blows up this time.
Kind of scary. It was definitely the most, from what it appears, the most unreliable handgun here, as far as stuff that's just happening with the gun that is not directly correlated to ammunition. So we had a total of 3 failure to extracts on day 1, so when the handgun was new on our 800 round range day, 2 on this next day when we shot 900 rounds, and then on day 3 we had 5. We also had the trigger not resetting at one point. I can't remember which of us.
That was me.
It was you.
Yeah, it was like a slide lock back. So it was like a failure to extract or something. Slint the slide home and the trigger wouldn't reset.
Yep. So not great. The total stoppage count is 16, and that includes the light strikes. But we had much more traditional handgun stoppage issues with this than the others. Now the price point on the gun though, $350. Hard to beat. It's like half the price of some guns here, close to. So there's definitely that, you know, in its favor. But let's get to this evaluation scoring. I've got, for, make sure I have the right one, reloadability, I have a 4.
I have 3.5.
3.5.
Ease of draw, I got a 4.
Got a 4 as well.
Got a 4.
Trigger, I got a 3.
Got a 2 for the trigger.
2.5.
Interesting. Recoil, I got a 4.
Got a 3 for the recoil.
I also have a 3.
That is interesting. My fast ability is going to be a 7.
I'm going to be a 6.
I have an 8, same as the Glock.
All right.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I bet all of our scores are very similar once you add it all up.
With the Dagger too, on a couple of the failure to extracts, they were almost like half stovepipes where the brass would get stuck long ways in the chamber from front to back. I've never had that encounter with a gun before. Normally it's like the empty chamber or the empty brass is sticking completely out and you can just like rack it out. But it would be the brass is caught, the empty brass is caught, you have a new round in the chamber, then you have a round from the mag is about to go and was a well, and it was just a weird malfunction.
Mess.
Yeah, that happened to me, I think close to 3 or 4 times over the 3 days. So it was just not a reliable gun in my hands as well.
What's your total?
Total is 18.5.
What's yours, Brandon?
21.
Which sucks because you have like a gun that
I'm at 22.
on numbers is well, but like can't perform well.
Yeah, and I would venture to say on our score, if we look back at our score drills, the malfunctions probably destroyed some of us actually shooting the stages.
The Dagger was my highest run.
On anything?
Yeah, the Dagger was your second highest, and it was Brandon's last was worse.
So yeah,
Because you had malfunctions.
yeah,
no,
Brandon had a ton of
wasn't.
malfunctions.
Oh, it was malfunctions and the EPS died. So I shot.
That's
Yeah.
different.
You didn't shot-
yeah. That's not.
But so you threw 3 mics because your dot died.
That's why I'm not using the stages for full comparison.
No, they're not for full.
Otherwise,
I have
we
to
won't
say
shoot
that's
it.
like my favorite shooting pistol here, and it performed the worst, which is really disappointing. Seems to be pretty consistent though with PSA.
Okay. Last but not least, the Sig P365. Now, we had the 0 dot on here, which a lot of people do take off as soon as they buy the handgun, but there's plenty of people out there who don't. So that's what we were running. I'll just start off with the handgun and say that this was probably the weirdest gun to get to figure out. The first thing I noticed shooting this, and I've had other people message me since we started doing this, confirming that this is a more widespread issue than just something that I noticed, is it's very hard to get your support hand on the gun. And when you are running a pistol light, if your thumb wanders down here into the light, you're going to jam your thumb. Because this is a very snappy handgun, just like it's a small gun, but maybe possibly more snappy than some. And because the grip is so small and your fingers wrap around, it is hard for me to put my hand anywhere on this handgun. And I have like medium-sized hands, so like shooting this handgun for me was very difficult. Shooting one-handed was fine because like, I'm not putting my hand on there. And then I actually wondered if shooting this without a light was potentially helpful. I had it in my notes here. But yeah, getting my support hand on this gun was definitely the worst out of everything. Just trying to find a place for it because of just how the ergonomics of the grip are set up. And the trigger was very fast to shoot, but it was a little bit harder to use at distance. I think that's the angle of how it's breaking. But I was able to pull off some really fast times and hits at close range with this, good splits. That's fun. And then all the controls for me were solid. Mag goes out, mag goes in, it's got a little flare. It's actually pretty nice. And we ran 17 round mags. I think it's the only gun here with a full-size type magazine that we were running. And even the flush magazine, I think, holds 12. So 12 and 1 in the chamber. I can get a full hand on it. So pretty nifty little gun. The recoil and the support hand stuff, though, was tough to figure out.
Same complaint that, I mean, when I can almost have my fingers touch my hand with just one hand. So basically you're shooting the gun one-handed because you have no real estate to put your support hand. And whenever you do try to put your support hand on the gun, then you have all of your fingernails digging into the middle of your palm, which makes it even worse. And topple that to your thumb digging into the light, it's just not very pleasant to shoot. It's actually more pleasant to shoot without the light, which was kind of weird. I've never had that happen with a gun before. The dot, I think either the dot died or the battery died. I think it was the battery dying on me the second day. It was just kind of flicker on and off in between a stage, and that was not enjoyable. But actually was able to shoot this gun fairly quickly, more quickly than I was expecting. So that was nice. The trigger's weird. It's not a mush, it's not a wall, it's like this weird hybrid thing, but you can shoot it fast, which was very interesting. But didn't like the gun overall very much. Controls were great. It was nice to have 17 rounds. That helped out a lot in some of the drills. But yeah.
So I'll just start saying this is the gun I hate the most. Hate's a strong word, but I'm going to use it with this gun. Manipulations are pretty stiff with the slide release. Now when the mag is full, not that bad, but even with the full mag, like this is taking all I got to release that. So I really hated that. The trigger doesn't feel the best when you're actually using it or dry firing it, but when you're shooting it, like they said, it seems to be pretty quick. And I think it's because of how springy that reset is. It's extremely, extremely assisted, and the trigger's so far forward that you're just not moving your finger as much. So they definitely have the ergonomics down when it comes to the trigger pull and being able to run it fast. That would be great if the grip was like they already mentioned, a little bit bigger, so I actually had two hands on the gun. I hated it, not obviously because of the recoil aspect, but also drawing this gun was a lot more difficult because you're just like kind of reaching all the way around, you're grabbing shirt, you're not just getting a consistent placement of your hand on the gun. So with all that said, this is definitely my least favorite gun on the table.
As far as reliability goes, we had a lot of light strikes with this handgun. We had 3 on the first day, so when the gun was fresh. We had 12 on day 2. So something started happening with the gun, probably. We had a failure to fire on day 2 as well, and that's when the dots started to flicker. Now, we're not really comparing dots here. That should be in a different video. Screws came loose, we screwed it back down, and then it seemed to work on day 3. So that was good. Definitely something to watch for. And then we had 4 light strikes on day 3. So out of, similar to the Glock 43, we only had one like traditional stoppage, like a failure to fire, failure to feed issue. Now. Whoa! Malfunction! Granted, I was shooting one-handed, but it shouldn't do this with a good firing grip. Failure to feed! We're fine. All right. Outside of all the light strikes, so it's probably on par reliability-wise with, say, a Glock or something. It just had a lot of light strikes with this Winchester white box, like everything else. Price point on this gun, this is the most expensive at about $620. Now there's a lot of P365 versions out there. They range in price, but this particular one that we have, which is optic cut, is around $620. So it's up there as the most expensive option listed here on the table, if that's something that you care about. But let's actually get into the scoring of the gun. I have reloadability at a 4.
That's generous. I have a 3.
I have a 2.
Ooh. Easy draw, I got 2.5.
Got a 2.
2.
Triggers 3.5.
2.5.
2.
Man, I'm just bored. I'm in a generous mood, I guess. Recoil, I got a 2.5.
2.5 for the recoil.
1.5.
Ooh. My fastability is a 6.
Got a 5.
Got a 4.
Whoa!
Pretty
All
similar.
right, my total is 18.5.
Total is 15.
My total is 11.5.
How did you do a 3.5 trigger? Like how? Tell me that.
I can rip it fast. I can rip it really fast. I was shooting bill drills with it very nicely.
Well, that should play into more of the fastability than the trigger. Would you put that trigger in a Glock?
No. Yeah, that's why it's a 2.5.
You said 3.5.
No, trigger's 2.5. Oh no, sorry, that's the Hellcat. Yeah, 3.5. That's right. Yeah, 3.5.
You confusing yourself?
Yeah, I was kidding. No, it wasn't as good as a Shield, but it wasn't, the worst.
I'll give you that.
It wasn't the worst.
Something we haven't specifically mentioned is shooting momentary only with these small guns on these lights.
We have not gotten to that, no.
Brutal. Shoving your
Yes.
thumb into this and having that recoil come back
that
into
gun
it
was
is
the worst when it came to weapon light.
you
Actually,
might as well just have constant only.
Actually, no. Shield was worse with this light. Then that. The shield didn't work. Yeah, but activating this light would suck.
Yeah.
Everything else was okay, but yeah, I agree with Brandon. Light usage on this gun was the worst.
I felt like the light was sitting just closer to your hand. Like there was no space to even like drop your thumb. You had to like retreat.
Well, you're
your thumb to
you're at
push.
an angle which is more painful.
Yeah.
You're not flexed outwards to be properly absorbed. Unlike on every single handgun here, straight thumb. So like that's going to be comfortable. And the P365 is just an absolute... I'm at a right angle. Look at that. Look at that. So I ended up shooting this constant. I'd flip it on, put my thumb back, and shoot. This is also the gun that gave me a permanent burn on my hand. But that's okay.
That one did get hot for me pretty quickly other than
It did.
the rest of
Yeah,
them.
I literally still have this burn callus right here.
Yeah.
It's from
None of the other guns was after you're shooting 4 mags out of it. You're like, okay, that one's a little toasty.
No.
I avoided that gun as much as I could, so...
So you guys are probably having a lot of opinions and thoughts after watching all of us talk through our opinions on these handguns and having some varying scores on a few of them. And it is important to note that, you know, in the process of us testing these handguns, we each shot about 650 rounds on each handgun. At our skill level, that is enough to come up with I think a pretty good opinion on what's going on. We're not just picking up a singular handgun on a singular range day and shooting it. We're actually shooting all of these guns on a single day and doing direct evaluation and comparison right then and shooting enough rounds that our hands are in literal pain. And at our skill level, you know, being able to shoot these handguns, there are some specific things that we're looking for that, you know, probably some reviewers out there aren't able to do or aren't doing. I mean, the big one for me is going back to 25 and shooting these guns as fast as possible and seeing how the dot is rising and falling, which is one reason, again, going back to the beginning, why we're not shooting irons. Shooting irons, there's some information we would not be getting on these handguns as easily. Shooting with a dot, we can actually see how the dot is tracking. On some of these guns, I saw my dot flashing to the left more than other guns. Some guns, I saw the dot just flashing up, maybe slightly to the right, and that was much more predictable and much easier to shoot at distance than the guns that were kind of flashing all over the place side to side. With iron sights, you're not necessarily going to notice that. So after shooting 650 rounds on all of these guns, you know, I'd love to shoot more, but in this case, you know, for this evaluation and what we're looking at, is not necessary. If we were doing a torture test and we want to put like 5,000 rounds on every gun, different story. But for this just shooter analysis, how good are these guns at shooting? This is pretty solid. With that said, I have the average scores. So taking all 3 of our scores on all of these guns, I'm going to start from the bottom. On the bottom, we've got the Hellcat with an average of 11.5. Using our scoring metric. We've got the, next we've got the P365 at a 15. We then have the Reflex, the FN Reflex at an 18. Then the Shield Plus at an 18.6, so just slightly, you know, coming ahead of the Reflex. And then the PSA at a 20.5 and the Glock 43X at a 22. And this is where you guys go, well, of course the Glock won, they're Glock shooters. Yeah, that very well could be the case, but it's also the gun that we were able to shoot the best. And at the end of the day, when you are choosing a handgun to carry on your body, the shootability of that handgun should be the #1 priority. So with all that said, gentlemen, are there any surprises hearing the average scores now that we've totaled everything up and just with this evaluation in general?
Those averages are pretty close to mine. We flipped. My worst was 365 before instead of the Hellcat. But other than that, the FN averages, we all had the same exact FN. Yep. So everything else is within half a point or a point. So
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with all of them.
I will say, and Brantley mentioned this earlier, that the reliability issues we had with the Micro, like even though it scored high on shootability, because it did, the reliability is it's definitely what kills it for me. I would carry the Shield Plus, even though it technically scores lower for shootability. I would carry that before carrying the PSA Micro. Just reliability should be very important. And it's not necessarily something we're vetting here besides just tracking our reliability. But that is definitely something to note on this handgun, since we did have the most traditional stoppages outside of just light strikes with the Winchester white box. So that's definitely points against the Micro Dagger.
I would even be close to saying that I would
way
recommend
down
this
to that.
gun than the Shield, solely for the fact that I could just tame this recoil so much better. If this was a quarter-inch longer, I think this would be, and it was able to
And you have
not
a
have
better
so many
light.
light strikes. So either better ammo, upgraded hammer spring, or whatever it needs to be, this would be a very good gun. I would enjoy that. If I could make a Frankenstein best gun out of all these, I think I would take the frame of the Dagger. I just like that feel.
Yep.
I would take the trigger of the Shield, somehow the recoil impulse of the FN, and the reliability of the Glock. I think that would be probably the best.
I think we have to say reliability of the Hellcat though.
But it's just too trash. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
even,
that's true.
The reliability was the best on the Hellcat, and the accuracy.
because the springs were so heavy. I think it worked well.
So last thing I want to note about this is, so we shot these guns obviously comparing them as shooters. You know, these guns aren't intended to be shot as a training pistol, like, you know, full-size guns, you know, Glock 19 subcompacts, but I want to talk about the size of these guns. So in my opinion, when I carry a gun, I want to carry a gun that as big as possible, that's still comfortable, and that just gives me the best ease of mind, especially with the Glock. You get that reliability. It's going to be very close to the gun I shoot most often, the Glock 17, and that's going to be the Glock 19. So when I compare this to a 43X or a PSA Dagger, or basically any gun with a TLR7 sub on it, we are looking at a very similar size gun. Obviously the Glock 19 is going to be thicker, but when it comes to comfortability when wearing a gun, that's the main point I want to talk about, is the length is what's going to matter the most. So as long as I'm able to hinge at my hips, put my shoes on without having to like stick a leg out because my gun's too long, that's great. So when I get a light on these subcompact guns, or sorry, these super compact guns, I'm getting the same size as the Glock 19. And other than that, the only difference there is the thinness and the weight of the gun you're carrying. and now some of these have 15 round mags in them, so the weight's basically the same, especially when you're loading up ammo in it. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at a gun to carry, is that you can get a Glock 19 with a TLR7, and if you're carrying a lot on these guns, it's going to be very, very similar.
Friends don't let friends buy Hellcats.
No, they don't.
Or Sig 365Xs.
Now, if you are going out and purchasing or you already have a micro pistol such as one of these, I see a lot of people in the comments who hate Glock because it's a Glock, or they hate a Sig because it's a Sig, or they hate whatever it happens to be. And I see very little objective opinion that's based on experience shooting that firearm. Got a little news flash, this shouldn't be a secret to anyone. Any gun works really well if you never shoot it. Love seeing those comments in the comments. I have such and such, it's always worked for me. And I'm like, well, based on your comment, it sounds like you shoot once a year. So yeah, I'm sure that equipment works just fine for you, only shooting once a year. If you go and select one of these pistols, you need to be honest with yourself. Can you actually shoot that handgun? Is it you or is it the handgun? And some of these handguns, especially in this class, are much harder to train with and shoot with than a full size. Like if I take a Glock 17 or an M&P 2 or even a P320 full size, like handing that to a new shooter, they'll be able to shoot all those quite well. These guns require just a lot more attention to the fundamentals and gripping the gun tight and controlling recoil. Even ripping the slide, they're stiffer slides. I don't recommend you get these guns like for women, which is always, I mean, it's either you get them a revolver or you go straight to one of these. There's a reason my wife prefers a Glock 19 over her 43X that she has. It's easier to shoot, she can shoot it much faster, it's easier to rip the slide, and that's what she carries when she runs and goes everywhere. So if you are selecting one of these, you know, a P365 or one of these small guns, take it to the range and actually shoot it at 25 meters. Shoot a bill drill up close, 6 rounds from the holster at 5 meters. Can you actually land good hits? Can you reliably pull it from the holster and actually shoot it? Because it is possible, and I've actually seen this happen, where people dog on a gun like the Glock because it like looks bad or it feels bad or lots of people use it, and they choose a gun they actually can't shoot very well when they actually shoot the Glock better. And so if your priority is carrying the best weapon possible, which is what it should be, because that's what this is about, then you really need to go look for the best weapon that you can shoot the best. And is also highly reliable, and that should be the objective. And then get a holster that works well, whether it's one from our company or another, and actually carry that gun all the time. A gun in the safe, it really isn't that useful. So I hope this video was helpful, guys. Again, this is an evaluation. This is not a test. I mean, we each only shot 650 rounds in every gun. That's still more, especially for compact pistols, than a lot of content and just shooters out there will do. This is something we'd like to do more of in the future. You know, we have some very experienced shooters here at the company. Brantley for coming on board, and then Brandon, who's now been here for a little bit. So we have the ability to actually evaluate some weapons as a group and have some averages. So if there's any other handguns that you would like to see evaluated, particularly against other handguns, if you'd like to leave those in the comments, we will be in the comments looking at those, and we will use some of your opinions to come up with the next evaluation that we'll be doing. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Did a 183 build drill with the 43X.
A 183.
From the draw. With, this one's got one left.
Wait, who?
Awesome.